Welcome back. UFOs, are they real? We're talking with John Lear on the subject. Mr. Lear mentioned a couple of minutes ago about what the president might say about UFOs. Do you believe that various presidents have been informed about what you believe to be the truth on UFOs?
Each president has been informed up to and including President Reagan. I'm not sure to the extent they are informed. Privately, I don't believe they are giving the full briefing. The people that control this information is a organization that we know of as MJ-12, and they're a top group of military and scientists. And I do know that when the president becomes president, it takes at least 3 or 4 months before he actually gets the clearance to know everything there is. Now that doesn't mean they tell him, but it does take 3 or 4 months to get. Now, talking to the president, let's talk about what the president has actually said. Has he mentioned anything about aliens?
President Reagan?
President Reagan on December 4th, 1985. This is a copy of the speech from the White House just before he went over to Iceland. He says, "I couldn't but, one point in our discussions privately with Secretary General Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children, wherever we may live in this world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet outside in the universe. We'd forget all our local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together."
Now, he couldn't be just making a supposition for purpose of making a point? You're saying he's trying to tell us something?
Well, here, 1 week ago at the 42nd General Assembly in front of the UN, September 21st, he says, "In our obsession with the antagonism of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside, universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet I ask you, is not an alien force not already among us?" Now, this is right out of a White House speech. I'm not making this up.
What did he mean by this alien force? I mean, does it say? Does he go on to say something?
Yeah, he says, what could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our people than war and the threat of war?
I see.
But the point is, why would he even bring up aliens? I mean, it's pretty far out for the President of the United States to be mentioned threats from outer space.
Okay, what about President Carter?
President Carter, we have the quote from Carter when he was during his election campaign, "If I become president, I'll make every piece of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and the scientists. I am convinced that UFOs exist because I have seen one."
Jimmy Carter says he saw one.
That's Jimmy Carter. He saw one in
But
1973.
he didn't tell us, did he?
He doesn't. The pressure is enormous on these people to cover this stuff up.
How can that be? Are they afraid of a panic? That people would panic?
There's the panic problem, and there's also the problem that, in fact, in Cro-Magnon man, there may have been some tinkering to make us what we are today. And that's been borne out by several researchers. We couldn't have developed exactly the missing link. Something had to happen to get us going. Between 4000 and 8000 BC, we had just been going along and for hundreds of thousand years not doing anything. All of a sudden, bang, we started making pottery, invented the wheel, invented fire, and everything took off. What was the key that did that? I don't know, but it causes one to think.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago before the break that you think 90% of these visitors are hostile. What makes you think that?
Well,
doesn't fit with what we think of as ET, you know?
If you read several of these books that are on the newsstands, one is called Intruders, one is called Communion. They apparently come down, and when I say apparently, this is taken from 300 hypnosis cases. A friend of mine has done 140 of them. And the people are abducted, they're taken up into a saucer, usually lasts about an hour. They do all kinds of experiments, they give them shots, they poke them, they cut them, they do all kinds of things, then wipe out their memory and send them back. Only after several months of some psychological problems do they end up going to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist, on trying to find out what the problem is in the use of hypnosis, finds out that this person has been abducted.
What's the reason for that? What are they trying to learn?
There's three things that they're trying to do with these abductions. The first thing is they're trying to monitor us. It started in the early 40s, and they'd put a little unit, a very small BB-type object, way up in the backside of the brain, and they'd leave it there for about 18 years. They'd pick them up and put it in about 4 years old. About 12 years old, they would pick them up and monitor it. Then about 18, they'd take it out. The second thing they did is they put a post-hypnotic suggestion. According to many of the people that have been hypnotized, and we found out what they've told them, apparently within the next 2 to 5 years there is going to be a big event. Something enormous is going to happen. And these people who have been abducted, and there's probably over 100,000 of them, have been given some place to go and something to do. But under our best hypnotic techniques, we cannot find out what it is.
So how do we know that that's true?
Because they said they're going to do something. They know that they're going to do something, but under the hypnosis, they can't find out exactly what it is. And the third thing that they do is genetic experiments. They've been crossbreeding. There's a very good book out now called Intruders, written by Bud Hopkins, and it's about a crossbreeding experiment with a girl in Indianapolis. And they actually, the big head, what we call the big head in research, the little 3.5 foot tall with a big head, they crossbreed that with this girl in Indianapolis, and there were 7 children. And just last fall, before the book was published, they brought the oldest and the youngest to show to her, and they let her name all 7. Now, this book has been thoroughly researched by Bud Hopkins, and although it sounds strange, believe me when I tell you, you may not find out in a month, a year, 5 years, or 10 years, but you'll look back at what I'm telling you now, and you'll say to yourself, my gosh, the son of a gun was right.
Well, where's this girl now? She's just living
on a farm? She lives in Indianapolis. She lives in town, or just outside of town. She just got married. Bud went to her wedding. We all know who she is. She gets along, just fine. It doesn't mean, just because she was adopted and gave him children doesn't mean it was the end of the world. It was just a part of her life.
Why don't we see a lot of photographic evidence, as many cameras and video gear? Why don't we see a lot of that?
There are a lot of them.
Before you go on, I know the pictures that we showed in the beginning of this program, you say they're baloney, they're phonies.
That's right. The pictures you showed at the beginning were called the Myers incident. It's called the visitors from Pleiades. And any ufologist worth his salt knows, and who has researched that case, knows that he cannot back it up with the negatives and the essential information to prove that something like that happened. So we look at that as suspect.
So in other words, you run into your share of phonies as well in your research?
Absolutely. There's not that many, but there are a few out there. There's so many people that have real stories to tell that we're just so busy with those. For instance, let's take the November 17th Japan Airlines incident.
I'll tell you what, we're going to take another break, and we'll do that when we come back. Stay with us.